recent stuff that I have um, is, as you mentioned, Girl of Hearts, and if I can get it straight, Mother of Spades, which is the sequel, book one and book two of that series. So um, the reason I say all that is because my answer might pertain to different projects because
Yeah.
different are a little different. But in terms of timelines, that is tricky because it tends to be like as I'm writing it, like a flow of action, like this thing happens that leads to that, that leads to that, that leads to that. So sometimes the timelines are a little bit compressed. And then it's usually in revision that I go back and be like, wait, so, okay, how much time passed between this event and that event? Um, or like, okay, what day would it be? Or like, okay, should they be hungry right now? Like, okay, when was the last time they ate? Like, when was the last time they got sleep or whatever? So, and sometimes that comes in a second or third draft, right? Like, first I just get everything out there, all the action, everything that's happening, and then sometimes the timeline is a thing that like you have to sometimes go back and like think about, and sometimes you have to make adjustments, like stretch it out, or like let's say you have somebody who's training, they're like learning a new skill or a new power or something. With my books, these are like contemporary fantasy, so people are learning magic, learning weapons and stuff like that. And sometimes you're like, oh, wait a minute, I had them learn like a whole new like like they became a badass fighter in like 3 days. You're like, okay, I need to stretch that out a little bit.
Okay.
So, yeah, you go back and look at that stuff. Characters are a little different thing. Characters, they come to you in different ways. For me, I kind of think about the story for, I'll have an idea for a story, and then you start populating that world with different characters, and as the outline comes together, and then it's like as you're writing, maybe you have an idea for a character and like a couple traits, that it's going to be a female, they're going to be, you know, strong willed and a little deceitful or whatever. Maybe that's all for me, like when I start off writing. But then I might go back, as I write, like that character, it's like getting to know a real person, kind of. It's like the more the time goes on, the more you see the things they do and the things they say that kind of come out in the moment as you're writing. They become more three-dimensional as that progresses.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of like a process of getting to know somebody.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes, I remember like I I'll say I was like what, maybe 20, 20, 25, 26 when me and one of my best friends, I haven't heard from him in years, we started writing a story.
Uh-huh.
It was called the story of my, like, for me it was called The Royal Vampire. So it was kind of like, because everybody talks about vampires, and every time you talk about vampires, everybody goes straight to, "Hey, Caitlin, how you doing? Welcome, welcome. Nice to have you here." It goes straight to like Dracula and all these Victorian era type of vampires,
Mm-hmm.
but mostly they concentrate on Dracula, or they go now with the new uh, underworld type of vampires. Or if you want to get into vampires like that, they not fit in the world, the Twilight one, kind of
Mm-hmm.
sparkly vampires.
Yep.
So I started digging, and I'm like, okay, so why they say Dracula is the first vampire? Why? Oh, he's the first, but why? Where did he came from? Okay, no, he did this. I'm like, then I'm starting looking, and I kind of touched the book that it should not be touched, the Bible. I started reading back and back and back and back. So you get back to like the first time you see where Adam and Eve is there. You see when Abel and Cain. So
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows that Cain gets marked.
Mm-hmm.
He cannot kill himself. He cannot. So I'm like, okay, so let me take Cain as a character, make him that he's trying to die, but he can't. He's getting old. He's getting sick, but he don't want to die. He's cursed with this mark. He can't get it off. He meets the devil, and the devil gives him the choice. He goes like, I can make you immortal, or I can take the mark. Like, I can't take the mark away, but I can take your life, or I can make you immortal. So he goes like, okay, make me immortal. So in that period, the devil goes like, it's going to cost you. He goes, what? It's going to cost you your mortality. It's going to cost you the way you look at the world. And he goes, I want to do it. I want to try it out. So he goes ahead and tries it out. Then he starts feeling urge for blood, and then he makes his followers, and the story mixes up like vampires and slayers getting into it. And you see like it's like a world of demons and monsters and stuff. So you have different types of like denominations like lizards, so like and all that stuff, type of monster type. So with the story progressing, Cain becomes the royal one, and he has one that is called Azazel, which is his right hand. He betrays him, and then from there it just switches. So halfway down the point, we stopped writing because he moved, I moved, I kept going, and so I'm like, I don't want to continue. Like I can't continue. I can't because you have half of the notes and I got notes and I can't match them. So because he was giving me all the ideas, but I mean some of the ideas that I needed to certain characters.
Yeah, that sounds sweet though. I mean, that's a great concept. I think it sounds really interesting. Yeah, just carry on, write that thing, get it out there.
So I got a question. Do you have any questions, Benoit? You want to ask him anything?
I don't have anything, to be honest with you. I'm just jazzed to be here.
Right. So one of the questions is, do you have a base? Do you base any parts of the world like from real parts, like the stories, like from our time, from different cities in the world?
Sure, yeah. So this series is, contemporary fantasy, or it could also be considered urban fantasy. It takes place in Detroit, and it really. So I lived in the Detroit area when I like a few years, like 20. Let's see, it was about 2015. What's that?
No, my dad wrote like he goes, I agree. You should continue.
Yeah, you should. It's a good story, and I know for sure I'd read it. But yeah, so 2015 or so, I was living in Detroit. So it's based on Detroit, but it's kind of Detroit like circa 2015. Like I think Detroit has come up a bit,
Okay.
from what's depicted in here. But again, so this book is about luck gods. So it's these demigods that are based on the four card suits: hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. And so the hearts and diamonds are like good luck gods, and the spades and clubs are bad luck gods. So a little bit of that dichotomy is in the setting a little bit, because and Detroit was like that when I was living there. I mean, definitely it was like there was like fancy new high rises being built, like a lot of big cities, but fancy new high rises being built, and then areas, especially Detroit in that time, was like really going through some stuff, right? So there's a lot of like whole blocks that are being abandoned and foreclosed and stuff like that. So kind of that dichotomy played out a little bit in the setting. But Detroit's a great city, and it created a great backdrop for the. So.
Sea Turtle, you should definitely check out the books. It's on Amazon. It's on audiobooks.
Yep. Audible and also KU, if anyone's is on Kindle Unlimited. You can read them for free on there, or just buy the ebook, buy the paperback, or the Audible.
Yeah. So, do you normally write just what genre, like YA, MA?
Yeah, I've kind of hopped around a little bit. So my first series was like YA, contemporary fantasy, urban fantasy. I had the horror book. I have a dystopian science fiction book. The other ones were YA. The sci-fi one's adult, and then this series is YA. But again, people of all ages could enjoy it. It's just that the protagonist is a high schooler, so that makes
this should put a smile on your face. They just said right now, I'm excited to read these books. They're on my bookshelf right now.
So, hey, all right, I like to hear that. That's great.
So,
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's been really fun. A lot of people have been reading them. Their response has been great. People seem to be enjoying them. That's one of the weird things. As an artist, you create something, you put it out there, and you're like, I hope everyone's going to love it. And then people start loving it, and you hear good things back, and then you kind of wait for the other shoe to drop. You're like, some people are not going to love it, But no, the response has been great. People seem to, be really enjoying them. So,
so as an author, is there a So I should before I can let's say I was to decide to get back into the saddle of writing. Is it mandatory to find the right words to like the right type of writing? How do you get into like that writing stage? Because I have like language for me is like my native language is Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was thinking about like having maybe because I tried to get into when I was writing the story to put like a sacred dialect between the Cain family bloodline, which is the Darkons family. It's Cain Darkon, which is his name. So from their like have like their own family have like this own dialect that they can only speak and nobody else can know. It's like a secret language. But I was like, should I make? I don't want to make it Spanish, but I don't want to make it English. I don't want to. So I was like, maybe throw in some Latin. But finding Latin is like I'm lost because that language is dead. It's you can't find the right words to get. But I was like, maybe I should try to incorporate both languages in one and make it like a unique or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
What tips can you give me on that side?
Yeah, that part of it, you know, yeah, anytime you bring in, say, oh, I'm going to create another language, that is definitely another level of complexity, but it's cool. I mean, it's super cool if you can pull it off. I mean, when I would say, you know, especially if it's your first book, right? You know, it's hard enough to get a first draft of a novel completed, and that's a great accomplishment. So I guess what I would suggest, rather than getting like bogged down and creating a whole language, which is a whole thing, is to just if it were me, I would just write out the whole book in the story, get the story laid out, get the characters, get a draft of the book from beginning to end. And maybe as you're writing it, maybe you just kind of highlight the words, you know, the phrases that should be in this language, in this dialect, and just write them in English to begin with. And then once you get to the end of it, if you're like, you know, then reread the book, you know, and say, okay, would it really benefit the book for it to be in this different language, this different dialect? And then if so, then go ahead and come up with that, what that language is, and translate it there. You know, that way it's not like distracting you or taking, because it could be a big distraction to like come up with a whole language at the same time you're writing, because you're flowing in your writing, and then you're like, hit this phrase, you're like, oh, I have to go create this phrase, right? Okay, that takes you away from your writing. So in terms of writing process, I always recommend, especially for someone starting out, just get that first draft down, you know, and then but I mean the language thing is cool, and I think that's an interesting thing if you could make it kind of a mix of you know, English and Spanish and Latin, kind of with a twist on it. Yeah, it could be super cool.
Okay, I see. Like, I'm kind of like thinking now, like, so should you do like, let's say, should I do it on Word? What program should you like? It's just like I'm not gonna like, because I was writing it on Notepad back in the day, you know.
Yep.
I wasn't into computers that much, but
Yeah.
now that more and more. So, what would you recommend for someone to start writing?
Yeah. So for me personally, I write in Word. I've always written in just Microsoft Word. It's easiest for me. I'm a quick type. Like I was saying, I learned to type when I was like pretty young. So my brain is like connected to my fingers. So it would be very hard I actually hate writing with a pen or pencil. So I could not do it that way. Everybody works differently. Some writers will only write their first draft with like a pen on a piece of paper. Like that's how their brain functions. So it has something, you know, something to do with how you work. But for me, like, I remember I wrote my first screenplay that I wrote, and I wrote it on these like legal pads, you know. And so I wrote it on these legal pads, and then I had to, of course, a lot of work, then take the legal pads or retype it, you know, type it into a program. And then the problem with that was once I typed it over, it ended up being like 250 pages, which is like way too long for a screenplay. You know, it ought to be like 95 pages, you know. So I'd say that's one downside to like just paper and pen, is it makes it hard to know how long is it, you know. Am I writing, is it am I gonna type it up and it's like super itty bitty short? Am I typing it up and it's like way too long and now I have to do a bunch of cutting, and all that is extra work. So if you know, you want to keep an eye on word count. Like a good word count for a novel is like 50 or 60 to 90,000, 60 to 90,000 words is like a good length. So if you're writing in Microsoft Word, you can just always keep an eye like, oh, how many words do I have? You know, if I'm like,
Right.
40,000 words and I'm about halfway through the story, I'm good to go, you know. But if you're
Okay.
writing some other way, but the other thing I do Word, but some people also use Scrivener.
Okay.
Scrivener is a program that's more like designed for writers, and it has outlining capabilities and stuff like that. So I know a lot of writers use that. I just have never messed with it. I'm kind of old school. I just have always used Word.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got questions on the chat. It says here, what do you do when you have writer's block? Writer's block.
Yeah. So for me, like I have some built-in pieces of my writing process that hopefully writer's block proof me a little bit. So first of all, I've more and more throughout my career moved toward outlining my book more. So I make sure that I have an outline of the book now from beginning to end, a fairly detailed outline. And by detailed, I mean like at least one sentence per scene that's going to take place in the book.
Okay.
And that's a grind. Like it's a grind. It takes me sometimes weeks to bang out that outline. And it's much harder for me to think in the abstract like that, but it really saves you from that moment of like, I don't know what should come next. Or from, sometimes writer's block comes when you like have written in a certain direction for a while and then you realize, oops, like that's not really how the story should have gone. And then you're like, well, now what do I do? How far, do I need to delete some scenes? Do I need to change this? You become just confused. Or if you don't know what happens next, you just say, oh, I'm going to put it aside for a while to think about it. Maybe you never can't come back to it. Or maybe you realize that whole beginning you wrote wasn't really going in the right direction. So now you have a problem or you're disillusioned. So writer's block can come in a number of different ways. But even when I follow that process, there's still books that I've like started on, and I might even get 30,000 words into it, and then realize that there's some like vital component missing. There's just something missing. It's not quite like pulling me through the process, and I don't know if I'd call that writer's block. It's just like maybe that project is not the project for me right now. So then I'll put it aside. But the biggest thing is if you're serious about writing, to sit down and write every day, ideally, or like 5 days a week. Sit down and do it. The number one cure to writer's block is sit down and write. Because something might come out, or if you're pushing forward, it's moving forward.
So like how do you create your characters? Like how do you come with like mine? Like I told you, like mine, I based them from Cain and Azazel, which Azazel is he's a demon. I was doing some research back in the day. Azazel is one of the demons from the 7 levels of hell. So there's one big demon in each. It's like a boss. It's like a video game, a boss in each game. So each level. So Azazel is one of the. I think he's the third one in the chain of levels. So I chose him, and I'm like, okay, I like him. I like the way he's supposed to present himself. Mm-hmm. So from there, that's how like I picked them from like doing the research. But how do you come up with your characters?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the character. So like for this book series, the main character, her name is Aggie, and she's a teenager. Her mom's a scientist, and she kind of is like following in her mom's footsteps, being like she's just like really into science. She's like all A student, very like alpha, get good grades, proudly nerdy girl, but she also has OCD that's kind of like exacerbated by something a traumatic incident that happened in her past. And her character sort of developed as I worked on this book. I think initially I knew that she was going to be a scientist. I knew she was sort of spunky, nerdy type of girl. And then the OCD was something that got layered in later, that I realized that was a part of her and that needed to be there. So, sometimes things come in layers. Sometimes you're you'd be a little ways into a book and you realize something about a character, and you go, oh, I'm gonna layer that in there. And sometimes, like for this, you talk about, like, you were talking about the mythology of the world that you're working in. And this one is, again, it's gods based on the 4 card suits, right? So you think about like a Queen of Hearts. Okay, like what is that Queen of Hearts like? And is it like what would jump to your mind when you think of a Queen of Hearts, or is it like different, so it's surprising? What's a Jack of Hearts going to be like? What's a Jack of Clubs going to be like? um what's the Queen of Spades like? So it kind of, each of these, if you think of the card, if you think of those suits, if you think of the symbols, the good luck and the bad luck, they kind of evoke their own things. And then I worked hard to make sure that the characters were a diverse cast of characters, and just kind of interesting people with interesting backstories. And like, really, you could write, I could write a book from the point of view of any of these like 52 characters, right, that are the gods in this series. So it's kind of cool. So I think, but the characters arise in different ways. But for me, it's kind of as I write about them that I learn about them, and that comes from the subconscious of my own mind as I'm creating, and what comes out in those different scenarios.
Okay. So before I get into one of the questions I got here written down, I got one of the guys is asking, if you write a book in a certain location, do you do a like cultural study of the place? For like, if you write in the book, let's say you're in Hawaii and you're writing, and the Samoans or like Hispanics, with the festivals and everything, do you study the culture, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really heavily depends on the project. I think it's good to, for example, like I said, I lived in the Detroit area for a number of years, and I've lived in Michigan most of my life, so certain elements of that culture were just intrinsic to me. And so a lot of it was just plucked from living there, from my experience, from the people I know and the people I knew living there, and all those little details. But it depends on the story, really. If your story is really about the fabric of that culture, then you're going to be digging more into various aspects of that. For me, my story, it's a fantasy story. It's about magic. It's really about these gods. The setting is important, but it's more of a backstory, or it's just the setting. It's in the background, So I probably did less like cultural research per se for a book like this than somebody would do if they were writing a literary fiction book that's really examining and commenting on the social workings of Detroit. So in short, it depends on the story.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that they asked me this question one time. Do you normally, it's like, do you write spicy now, like spicy genre novels, not spicy? Like, because I know like there's a lot of people that read books and they're like, oh, you should read this book that has like these scenes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was reading the book I read a while ago was The Savage Lands. So I'm reading the book, and she's explaining to me how the book is and how it goes, and I'm like, okay, let me try it out. So I get the book and I'm start reading. I'm like, okay, oh, whoa, oh, I need
Yeah.
more. Wait, I need more. Oh,
Wait a minute. Yeah. Oh yeah, and those books are, and I think you first saw me on TikTok, right? And those books are huge on. I mean, I ought to be writing those books because they like fly off the shelf, right? Especially on the TikTok crowd, like they love those books. My wife likes those books. She, a lot of people like those books. It's not what I write. I probably ought to, you know what I mean? If I wanted to like be really successful and sell a lot of books, that's what I ought to do. My wife is like, you should write some of those books, but I don't know. It's not what I read is the thing. You know what I mean? Like that's not my genre that I normally read. So to do justice to any genre, you need to really know that genre. And so, again, it's not what I read, maybe someday I would try it, but it's just, yeah. So my books have like a teensiest weенsiest. I mean, there's like romance. More like it would be considered like slow burn romance. You might get some kisses or stuff like that. It's not spicy. It's not what you read.
Okay, okay, yeah. So like that is when basically it's part
It's
of
its
it.
own thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that world is like I seen like I follow a few TikTokers that write books. There's one of the girls that write books on TikTok. Her name is Vicky. I've been reading like she writes some novels, and I'm like, okay. Okay. I saw the novels. I kind of like scrolled through like a certain point like where she had them at, and I'm like, okay, that definitely will be looking into certain in a certain moment. Because for me, my books like I like space fantasy or like medieval times fantasy, like Lords of the Rings, type of that. So I'm the type of guy like if I'm playing like a video game that's based on like this world wasn't my character. Like I used to play like Skyrim. Oh, my friends were or Elder Scrolls type. My friends were like, "What'd you choose in this time?" I'm like, "What I always choose, what an elf or a ranger." He goes, "Why?" I'm like, "Because with a ranger, I got the elf, like I got the bow and arrow that I can shoot. I can work through it." And he goes, "Yeah, I can learn how to like he learns how to track and use their certain abilities. Plus, he's a ranger. He's good with weapons, so he can hand combat with a sword or use an axe." And they're like, "Okay." So that's basically like what I like. Star Wars, like the Star Wars novels, I like them all. I have read almost every book, especially the Han Solo saga, which Han Solo is my favorite character. So,
Gotta love Han Solo. Yeah, for sure.
so for me, like you say, like right now, like me thinking and putting my brain like haywire to go. If I was to write a book, something like that, I will make a character certain in a certain way, almost like Han.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
He's a smuggler. He's like he doesn't care about much people at a certain point, but at the same time he does care. But he's this rough type of dude that I don't have emotions. I can't show you. Like if you saw the Star Wars movie when him and Leia are talking, and she goes like, "Oh, I love you," and he goes, "I know." So,
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
like, I'm like, bro, that's basically me. And in a certain way back in the day, I was like, that's basically me. But started learning like a little bit more. So like, I still got my main character from the storyline that I was telling you about. His name is Angelus Diakon, which is a descendant he's from the bloodline of Cain. And I'm like, I could keep flooding it. And then my friend was like, he was reading what I was writing, and he was like, why does this character have almost similar parts of you? Like he does what you like to do. He's cold. Because back in the day, I used to be like, didn't care. I didn't put emotions into nothing. It was like, it's like you always like, but if somebody's in need of help, you always there. You will always give your hand no matter what it is. And I'm like, I don't know. He goes like, you were basing it off of him? I'm like, yeah. So he goes like, okay, so let's base this other character off of me. So I made Brandon B.O., which he was a regular human. Because back so like in certain fantasies and certain movies or certain worlds, like if there's a vampire covenant, they have the servants. So he was a servant for the Darkon family, and he was getting sick and sick and sick, and him and Angelus became good friends. So Angelus was sent away, and they were going to kill Brandon. So he turned around and came back to a place where he was at, and fought everybody from his household kill some of the deserters from the other family and save them, but he was wounded, about to die. So he was like, I can make you immortal. Like, I can give you what I have, but it's gonna cost you. You're gonna be like this. He goes like, go ahead. So he turned them, but their immortality was like they grew up like from kids. They grew up, and to like when they matured as an adult, they stopped growing. So they didn't get old. You wouldn't see no hair, no gray hairs, no nothing. They were just like, they stopped at a certain point and their maturity of going on.
Yeah. Like I said, you got to write it. It sounds cool. Yeah, you got to get that thing out there. I mean, I never get sick of vampires, you know. I love a good vampire story. So I think it's great. I think it sounds awesome.
Okay, I got a question. When you write, do you, because I've watched interviews of other writers. I know, like with Stephen King, he sets a goal a day that he writes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he has to come for a personal goal of X number of pages a day.
Mm-hmm.
So do you do something like that with yourself, where do you set a goal, or you know, how often do you write when you sit down?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And a lot of writers do have that. They have a word count that they're trying to knock out, or a certain number of pages. For me, where I'm at in my life right now, so I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 8-year-olds and a 3-year-old. I've got a full-time job. I'm the executive director of a arts nonprofit. So I got a lot going on. So so my goal is every day, at least 5 days a week, if not 6, to get into the book every day and to get something done. You know, so for me, where I'm at with my life right now, if I get like 2 pages done, that's pretty good for me. But what that does is it keeps you in the mindset of the book. You know, if you start to get away from it for a few days, then you forget. You don't remember the scene. You don't remember where you're at. It's different, you know, you don't remember that vibe. But for me, if you just keep at it, if you just, and I used to, I mean, I written during all different phases of my life. I mean, I used to be a, you know, leasing guy, manager of apartment complexes. I would have lunch break. I'd go up to a vacant apartment, sit down, bang out a few pages, you know, 40 minutes of writing up there while I ate my lunch, back downstairs, leasing apartment. So it's that discipline of like getting it in every day, you know. There was a time, for a couple of years, actually, I was just writing full time and didn't have any kind of day job, you know. So I think under those conditions, it's a little easier to say, you know, I'm going to sit in this chair until I knock out this number of words or this number of pages. But you know, for me, my time just doesn't work that way right now. Maybe someday I'll again, you know, just write full time. But I love my day job, so I'm not trying to go anywhere. But yeah, different writers work different ways with that. But I would tell any writer, try to sit down every day. Try to at least make yourself get a page down every day, because it'll keep the story fresh in your mind.
Yeah. Now you write that down.
He's right, taking notes.
Of course, I got it. Like,
yeah, I said something worth writing down. That's good.
So when you have a, I know you mentioned something about an outline. That was one of the questions that was asked in the chat. If you had a vision of the book or a chapter or whatever, do you just go with the flow, whatever your mind takes you? So when you're drawing out your outline, what are you drawing your inspiration from? What are you having? It's like, oh, I want to do something like this or whatever. You know, where are you drawing that from? And
yeah,
about that process.
That's a good question. So I have, over my years of writing, developed an outline that kind of, it's like a mishmash of different ideas and sources that I've of just like writing philosophy. It's got some hero's journey ideas in it. It's got some ideas from the book Save the Cat, which is a famous writing book, if anyone's heard of that. It's got some ideas. Even like Pixar has there's like some like YouTube videos you can watch of like Pixar, how they do storytelling. So it's kind of like a mishmash of different ideas. And from all that, I've put together my own like 16-point outline for a story, and then I flesh that out. So that kind of helps me with the proportions of the story. Like, okay, what happens in the beginning, what's going to happen in the middle, which is the hardest part of a story to me, and then what's going to happen at the end. And then I force myself to sit down and write, again, like a sentence for each scene that's going to be in there. And I figure each scene is about 4 or 5 pages, and the whole book itself is going to be about, maybe 350 pages or so. And so from that, I can kind of, just nail all those pieces down. And then when I'm writing, I actually will take that outline and I paste it at the bottom of the document. So I'll write, I'll get to the end of a paragraph, or get to the end of a chapter, and then I can just look right down, and maybe I go away from it. Maybe that's it. I leave, I come back the next day. I can look at okay, what's the first thing in my outline? That's like the next thing for me to read. It's right there in the document. Because also once I like write something in my outline, I'll delete it. Right. So when I sit down to write again, I'm like, okay, where was I? And it's like, that first thing I see is like, okay, here's the next thing that's supposed to happen. Right. And so, but it's like, some people think outlines are taking away your creativity, but it's only like 1 or 2 sentences. Right. So it's just the most bare bones, like, okay, this is what has to happen in that scene. And then I just write it, and so, I just draw out that 1 or 2 sentences, plays out however it's going to play out. And invariably different stuff comes in that I never thought of when I was outlining it. There's always surprises. I always surprise myself in every scene that I write. So yeah, so that's kind of how I work, but it is a grind. I mean, it can be a grind to get that outline all done, because you want to jump past it. You're like, ooh, I just want to write the beginning, I just want to start the project, because that's the fun part. Like, the outlining is not the fun part to me. It's work. But yeah.
So when you're doing your outlines, I know you've got series out there, but you ever find it's like a Marvel timeline, you have all your entire series almost already mapped out, or you start an outline, you're like, I need to break this up into 2 different books and start. Do you ever catch yourself doing something like that?
Yeah, I wish that I had like an outline of the whole series. Like, for this series, I totally don't. So this book I wrote, it took me like a couple of years to write and revise this book. And then I wanted to write the sequel as like a rapid release. So this one I wrote in like 6 months. I knocked it out, wrote it, revised it, got it ready to go so that they could come out like 1, 2, like a month apart. And so I got those done. And then I was putting so much energy into getting this book out like on that timeline really fast. So I finally got it done, got it out there. People love it. People are really enjoying it, which I'm really happy about. But then I was like, okay, now book 3. And it was like, okay, I haven't even, I had like some idea of like overall where everything's going, but like book 3 was like, hey, I don't know what's happening, So I mean, I do have like definitely ideas about like where the whole series is going to end up, but there's like a lot that I just like. If you ask me what happens in book, well, now I've outlined book 3, so now I do know some of the things that happen. But like, ask me what was going to happen in book 4. I legit do not know, So for me, I kind of envy, like, well, it'd be nice to have like a, massive like outline of the whole world. But the flip side of that though is like, I really enjoy it. Like Mother of Spades. Like, there's characters in this book that I never thought of, that I never imagined. There is stuff that happens that like, yeah, I never just would have like guessed when I was working on the first book. That really surprised me, and that people are really enjoying. So like, that's the flip side to it, is you can just be free to just like surprise yourself. And if you surprise yourself, definitely readers are going to be like,
okay, so
what?
so since you threw that out from from this series, how many books are you thinking it's going to be?
I think this one's probably going to be 4, because there's the 4 card suits. And then I could always write a spin-off series, or write, something else related to it. Because again, there's 52 just of the demigod characters. So like, I could definitely write in this world as much as I want to, but 4 card suits. It's like, Girl of Hearts, Mother of Spades. The next one's going to be something of diamonds to be determined, so 4 card suits kind of fits. I could write one more. I could make it 5 books, but it just depends. I mean, it depends on where the story's at. It depends on where the series is at. Depends on if I have other like another idea of like a different series. It's really calling to me once I get to like toward the end of this one. So there's a lot of factors.
Sooner or later, you're gonna have to shuffle the cards. So you got to mix them
Oh
all up
yeah,
now.
right. I mean, they shuffle quite a bit in there because it's a pretty savage world. I mean, it's almost like a mob kind of mentality because they're always vying for power, right? They're always vying for the upper hand. They're always trying. So like, there's like a lot of like they get people, different gods getting killed, different gods getting, taken out of the picture or whatever. So yeah, so that deck is always getting shuffled for sure.
Okay. So anybody has more questions from the chat, throw them out there. We'll keep them rolling.
I'm gonna throw out one more thing. Hang on. There's one more. Here we go. This is the show and tell that I didn't bring out. So this is a novella that's part of the series. It's The Thief and the Lucky Boy, and this was free actually. You can get an ebook of this if you just go to my website jgabrielgates.net. You can get an ebook of this, and it's a good way to just check out like. If you like this book, you will like this series. It's not very long if you look at it. It's only like 50 pages. The paperback of it is for sale on Amazon if you wanted to actually own like the paper copy. But again, just go to my website. You can just sign up for my email list and get this for free. And it's like a side story. It's about this badass leprechaun who like steals this boy from the kind of luck being underworld, and he's like so lucky that she's like, this kid has got to be a luck god's kid because he's so lucky. So then she goes about trying to sell him to the luck gods, trying to figure out who his parents might be. And meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend, who's like this badass like goblin guy, is like chasing after her, trying to catch her. So that's this one. So it's a good introduction to the series. Good. It actually chronologically takes place between book 1 and book 2, but you could read it before book 1. You could read it, in between anytime really. So I just want to throw that out there in case anyone's like, I don't know, I want to try this guy out maybe, but I don't want to spend money.
All right.
Just check this one. Yeah.
So, something I just thought of when you were talking about that book. How do you come up with the titles for your books?
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't know. I wish I had a great answer to that. They just kind of come to me, They come to me, and I did get one great. So I have an MFA in writing from Spalding University, and one of my mentors said to me one time that a good book title, and a lot of writers don't follow this, but a good book title should really apply just to that book. Not that no other book could ever have the same title, but it's like pretty unique to that book. So I try to keep to that. I try to, but a title has a lot of jobs to do. It has to evoke genre. It has to, be interesting and exciting. It needs to kind of like be pithy and roll off the tongue. So it's and then for something like this, it needs to kind of fit convention for the series. Girl of Hearts was the first one, so it's like, okay, what's the next one? Okay, Mother of Spades. All right, so you see where it's going with the pattern. So there's kind of an art to it, but it also like it just hits you. It just feels right when you get the right one. You're just like, yeah, that's it. And I think coming up with a nice title is also inspiring. Because if you come up like sometimes just thinking about that title can kind of get you fired up a little bit, and can it can be inspiring in a way. So yeah.
Have you ever done any book readings?
Book readings? Yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of those. So my first 5 books were traditionally published. My newer ones are indie published, but for all of those I did a bunch of appearances in Barnes and Nobles, and a lot of times I would do readings. I did various readings at libraries. I did a lot of school visits where I would do readings. So yeah, I've done a lot of those. My background is is in acting. So I when I was at Florida State, I got a degree in acting. I did TV commercials when I lived in Los Angeles. So I'm like pretty comfortable getting up in front of people and reading my work. And so, yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Not for you.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to tell you though, you're on a podcast right now.
It's a little bit different. I don't have to look at a bunch of people.
That's true. They're looking at you, but yeah, it's true. You're not looking at them.
My dad just said sign up for the newsletters. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's cool because I like the newsletter thing too, because it's like you can always unsubscribe anytime, and I tell people it's fine. Check it out, look at the book, and if it's for you, great. You discovered something, a great new thing, and you're in my community. But anytime if it's not for you, you just click unsubscribe. It's not it doesn't hurt anyone's feelings. It's not a big deal, But I appreciate him checking me out. That's great.
Yeah, he said he's going to order the books for himself. He's going to try to order the books for himself. Other than that, like, there's some guys got to say, I got to make sure it's 2013. It's 2015, basically, between 2013, 15.
Well, so it takes place in present day, but the only reason I referenced that like 2015 is like that's when I lived there. So there's probably people who are gonna like look at what Detroit is like now. They're probably gonna say, oh, like, Detroit's like it's come a long way, right? Because like in 2015 it was a little more like an up and coming city, and now it's like come up a little bit more. So I think it probably emphasizes a little more that dichotomy between the good luck and the bad luck, and I haven't been to Detroit in a minute. Hopefully it's tipped a little more toward being a good luck city, compared to some of the challenges that were happening there at the time, with all the foreclosures and stuff like that. I hope everyone's doing better in Detroit, and I think it's come up a lot, but yeah, but it takes place in present day.
Definitely have to check that out.
Yeah, well, definitely we got to check it out. Other than that, you guys know where to find his books. Check out his website. You can find him on TikTok. J. Gabriel Gates.
Yep.
Check him out. And like always, check us. Keep following. The podcast. Thank you very much, everybody who joined and was there. Was there, not was here. Find us on TikTok doing our thing. Building our model kits or spaceships or whatever we want to build or do. If you want to play video games, come join us. Just let us be us. And be happy. Be happy. That's part of what we try to do. Thank you for the pointers. I really appreciate it. It opened my mind, and it kind of like now it makes me want to think okay, I got no more things to build. Let's try to write. Let's see if it works out.
You gotta knock out that book. I'm telling you, it's a good. I'm not blowing smoke. I think it's a good idea. I would read it. I think it sounds cool. So
I know
get that thing knocked out.
I know my partner here will read it, and then he'll come down to Miami and take the book and go like, "Wow,
the hell were you thinking?
What were you thinking?"
we all need feedback. Everybody gets some feedback.
Constructive criticism is what I call it.
Constructive criticism. Yeah, that's right.
That's right. The book hit me with it and be like, "Don't you ever do this again." But yeah, it's really, it's been really fun. I really appreciate you being here and taking the offer to be on the podcast. I reached out to some of the book authors and TikTok and places, and most of them were like, I really don't want to try it, and it wasn't like not hurtful, because like I know not everybody is into like going on a podcast or speaking about it, but it helps because there's people out there that want to get into a book series or read something, and they're like, I don't know what to read. Oh, I just grabbed this book and I don't know, like I read it a little bit, I threw it to the side, I haven't continued it. But given the feedback and how you guys think, it's important, because we buy a book or we get a magazine or book or something, and we read, like we get it because of the flashy colors and all that stuff. But the time that you guys put into the book, it's completely like a different story, and it's good to hear from an author like how you get the process going to the point where the book is completed, and now you have like you're going for like a series of books. You know, you got this is a series. You got already almost 3 books out, so it's continuing. I am definitely going to check the books out myself, even if it's an audiobook, and try to really like at least I can hear it while I do other things. But I will continue my search for everything that I like and like in different books areas. Not the spices, too much. I will get
Right.
spices, but not too much, And just joking, but we'll be there. And from it's really good for and thankful for you being here in the family of It Is What It Is podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. I had a great time. Thank you for all the thoughtful questions. And yeah, get on those audiobooks because you can be doing your stuff and listening. It's a great way to listen.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
Well, so guys, thank you very much for joining us. This is the time we don't ever want it to come, but we got things to do, and we got to continue going through. I'm Maverick Wolf. This is Pinoy, our special guest, Gabriel Gates. And like I always say, what we do in life echoes through eternity. Thank you very much for joining, and catch you in the next one.
Thanks again.